I welcome everybody to the Goose Summit. And I'll let Jesse start off with the intro, please.
The notice requirements of the Open Publics Meeting Act for this meeting have been met by transmitting the notice of the workshop meeting to the Commissioner's official newspaper on October 21st, 2021, posting the notice where required and filing a copy of the notice with the Commission clerk. The Deer Lake Commission meeting will be audio and videotaped and will be shown on APTV, Optimum 77, and throughout most of Monmouth County on FiOS 30. Okay, take it away, Don, or Nicole. Hi, Nicole.
I'm going to introduce Jesse. Thank you.
Welcome, Jeannie.
Nicole Rain, who is the wildlife biologist for the NJ Department of Agriculture, and she's very familiar with Deer Lake. She's been kayaking around Deer Lake all last year, the year before, in the spring and summer. And we're really pleased to welcome her for her presentation tonight on the Canada Geese and management techniques. All 7 of our municipalities deal with this issue. And we know that we have many guests tonight visiting and coming in for this workshop. So we welcome all of you as well. Nicole is going to provide her presentation first, and at the end of her presentation, she will then open it up to questions and provide answers to your questions. So now I'm going to just turn it over to Nicole. Welcome, Nicole.
Yes, thank you for having me this evening. And thank you for putting together this workshop. My name is Nicole Ryan. I work with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I've been with the agency since 2006, and I've been a wildlife biologist starting in 2010. Tonight's presentation, I'm going to talk about New Jersey's resident Canada geese and management techniques to help deter them. So just quickly about the organization I work with, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and then a sub-branch of Animal Plant Health Inspection Services, and then a branch Wildlife Services. Our mission is to provide federal leadership and expertise to resolve wildlife conflicts to allow people and wildlife to coexist. All 50 states will have a USDA Wildlife Services office, and depending on the state, the tasks of our agency will differ slightly. So in New Jersey, we concentrate on 3 main areas. Wildlife disease. We've taken samples for bird flu in the past, West Nile. We do sampling from deer and raccoons. And we work closely with other agencies on this, such as New Jersey Department of Agriculture and New Jersey Fish and Wildlife. We also do airport wildlife management. So some airports have asked us to come out and have full-time staff to help prevent bird strikes on the airfield. And then we do general wildlife damage management. And this is where the Canada Goose work fits in. We do 2 different things: technical assistance, such as outreach and public education. We field phone calls from the public and give them guidance on management, or give them references to find supplies or private companies. And then we also do some direct management where we'll go out in the field and conduct work as a fee for service. And this is where the egg addling for Canada geese comes in. So the presentation tonight I have broken into 3 main categories. The first one being about just the general Canada goose population in New Jersey, and then moving on to harassment and deterrent techniques. And lastly, talking about population management, which is the egg addling. So some general goose biology. They breed when they're about 3 or 4 years old. They'll live till about 20 to 25 years old, so they're a long lifespan. They form long-term bonds, mating pairs, so they will mate with the same mate annually. They have a strong fidelity to their nesting site. And what this means is once they find their area to nest, they're going to return to that same general area. Could be the same length, the same location to breed annually. They're going to lay, on average, 5 eggs in their nest each year, but this can range from anywhere from 3 to 10 eggs. And the female incubates those eggs for 28 days, about a month. So in New Jersey, we do have 2 behaviorally different populations, and that is migratory geese and resident geese. They differ by their nesting habitat or nesting areas, as well as their migration. So nesting geese that nest in the blue areas on the map, which are the East Coast states, they're going to be considered resident geese, whereas geese that nest in Canada above this blue area are considered migratory. As far as migration, New Jersey's resident geese are found in New Jersey year-round. The migratory geese are only in New Jersey during the wintertime, approximately October through March. So geese that you see in late spring, geese that you see with their young, or during the summertime, those are all our resident Canada geese that are in the state year-round. So one question I'm commonly asked is about their legal protection, such as, why are Canada geese protected since there are so many of them? And also, are the resident geese offered the same protection as the migratory geese? So to answer this is yes, all Canada geese, whether they're the resident or migratory geese, are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And this act requires a permit or a registration in order to handle or take any Canada goose nest, egg, or bird. But no permit is required to harass Canada geese. They're not protected under the Endangered Species Act because their population numbers are not low or at a critical level, but they are offered some type of protection under this Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So how did New Jersey's resident population get established? Because back in the early 1900s, Canada geese in New Jersey, as well as other areas of the US, were nearly eliminated due to unregulated harvesting of eggs, commercial hunting, and drainage of wetlands. New Jersey's population got reestablished in 2 ways. One being the release and escape of captive birds from private waterfowl breeders or hunters, and then purposeful reintroductions from adjacent states. And then once we had a small population within New Jersey, we moved, well, actually, our agency was involved at that time. New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife moved geese around to other areas within New Jersey to repopulate those areas. And that occurred in the 1950s and 1960s, these reintroductions. So today in 2021, our resident Canada goose population is about 63,800 birds. And this is based off of surveys that the New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife does every spring. They'll carry out these population surveys not only for Canada geese, but also for other waterfowl. And you can see this figure of 63,000 has remained pretty consistent for the past 5 years or so, with only a slight fluctuation. But back in the early 2000s, New Jersey's resident population for geese was around 100,000. New Jersey has the highest human density in the nation, as well as the highest resident goose density on the East Coast. So this can lead to some human and wildlife conflicts between people and geese. The red line on this graph is representing what is the recommended population number for our resident geese in New Jersey. And that is 41,000 birds. And this is from the Atlantic Flyaway Council. And they have based this on a population from the early 1990s when the damage and nuisance complaints were more at a tolerable level and were near this 40,000 population mark. One of the interesting studies that was done in New Jersey specifically was for a graduate student. And what she had done is she had compared the survivalship of the resident Canada geese from urban areas and compared it to rural areas in New Jersey. So she looked at the survival rate, which is the chances of a bird surviving from 1 year to the next year. She looked at young of the year as well as the adults. Young of the year, you can see for urban geese had a high percentage of about 83. And for rural geese, the young of the year, they had a 66% chance of surviving 1 year to the next. As adults, the percentage was pretty equal at 72, 73%, whether it was urban or rural. She also looked at the harvest rate for urban versus rural geese, and whether it was adult or young, urban geese were less likely to be harvested than rural geese. And this could be because in rural areas, there is more area open to hunting and more opportunities. Lastly, she also found that the success of eggs hatching was higher in urban areas than in rural areas. So the next section I'll move on to is some harassment and deterrent techniques for Canada geese. All birds, whether they're Canada geese, vultures, bald eagles, they all have a place and role in the ecosystem, as well as having aesthetic and recreational value to people. It's when there becomes an overabundance of the population or birds utilizing the same area day after day for a long period of time that you can come up in human-wildlife conflicts. As the pictures show, fecal accumulations, whether on sidewalks or on ball fields, are an example. Lower water quality, the closure of swimming beaches because of failed water tests, aggressive birds, property damage to lawns and golf greens, and also being a roadway hazard and an aircraft hazard. One of the things that our agency promotes for any species is an integrated wildlife damage management approach. And this is the use of multiple techniques to help alleviate the problem. So we typically break them up into like 3 categories, the different methods. First one being deterrence, which can include eliminating a feeding, visual aids, exclusion such as fencing, habitat modification, and repellents for lawn. And then there are different harassment techniques, pyrotechnics, propane cannons, auditory devices, and dog harassment. Population management includes depredation permits, regulated sport hunting, as well as the nest and egg management or egg addling. So the next few slides, I'll go into these in some more detail. But before I do that, I wanted to mention that mute swans are not a good deterrent for geese, and they should not be introduced into an area. First of all, mute swans are a non-native species. So by introducing a non-native species, you're then taking away resources and food from the native waterfowl. Also, they're not an effective deterrent. Some of the mute swans tend to be a little bit more aggressive and might keep geese out of a certain area, but that's primarily during the breeding season. The remainder of the year, you might see them, such as in this picture, utilizing the same body of water and swimming right next to each other. But as I said, not all the mute swans are on the aggressive side. Here is a picture of a mute swan sitting on her nest with a Canada goose sitting on a nest just 6 feet away. The last reason is that the mute swans can also create similar conflicts as the Canada geese. You can also get fecal accumulation in the water. And during that nesting season, if it's an aggressive swan, they can be aggressive towards boaters and people. So a little bit on the deterrence. Wildlife feeding. Bread has no nutritional value for birds. And when birds don't get the nutrition that they need, a defect can occur called angel wing. And this is non-reversible. It's when their wings, instead of growing, the feathers, instead of growing along the side of their body in alignment, they're actually growing outward. So also unintentional feeding should be avoided as well. Geese don't go after bird feeders, but if bird seed falls on the ground, they will opportunistically, take advantage of that. Feeding also results in abnormally high concentrations of birds in a certain area, which can lead to the damage, as well as it can lead to the spread of disease between those waterfowl. And lastly, feeding can result in birds becoming more aggressive towards humans outside of the nesting season. They associate humans with food then, and that's when they start approaching and potentially becoming aggressive. Some form of visual aids are lasers or beacon lights, flagging or reflective tape, balloons, predator decoys such as coyotes, and the dog silhouettes that you're probably familiar with. Out of these, the top recommendation would be the lasers and beacons of having a little bit more success at deterring geese, but any of them do have to be used with other forms of management and harassment, such as the dog silhouettes. If they're used with live dog harassment on a daily basis, and then the silhouettes themselves are moved around the property so that they're not stationary, the geese will have a better reaction to those silhouettes as they associate the live dog and being chased with the cutout. Another option is exclusion and habitat modification. And the goal here is to limit the easy access from the water to the land for the geese, and also to disrupt the line of sight so that it's hard to spot potential predators. So this can be accomplished by maintaining a grass height of 8 or more inches, because in the grass height, the predators would be able to hide in, and the geese would not be aware. Also, avoiding planting their preferred foods, such as succulent grasses, and then leaving tall vegetation and shrubbery around water sources or where the birds like to loaf. Once again, all of these things are going to have to be used in combination with something else. Because even this picture here, which has a steep shoreline and bank and tall vegetation, there is a goose nesting in this vegetation. So this shoreline still would have potentially a nesting population. Some more on exclusion and habitat modification. If a pond had a water aerator, it should be turned off during the winter time to allow the water to freeze. Detention ponds should be used for stormwater instead of retention ponds. And the difference between these are detention ponds, after a rainstorm, they drain after a certain amount of time, typically 1 to 3 days. Whereas a retention pond is going to hold on to that water year round. Another option is fencing about 3 feet high between the water source and the mowed grass. This is good in combination with also if you use some shrubbery or tall vegetation by the fence to help prevent the geese from simply just flying over the fence. And lastly are grid wire systems. And that's what these photographs are illustrating. The top one has orange construction fence around the perimeter, so geese can't simply walk onto this new area that was newly planted. So this is more of a temporary setup just until the grass gets established. And then they also put a grid wire system of string over it to prevent the birds from simply flying into the newly planted area. The photo on the bottom is more of a permanent exclusion, and it's covering a body of water and using Kevlar wire suspended from posts on each side of the pond. And those posts actually have a device where you can tighten the wire if it does start to sag. And the wire, the string in these instances is basically put far enough apart that it's slightly less than the bird's wingspan. So it's used on other species as well. Lawn repellents, these are sprayed on grass to deter geese from utilizing the area. There are many different products and brand names of them, but they will contain one of two things. They will contain either methyl anthrolite, simply known as MA, or anthraquinone, which is known as AQ. And I'm going to refer to them as the initials there so that I don't mess up their names. But they're sprayed on a lawn, just like you would be spraying other lawn material, a weed killer or something, or they can be sprayed with a fogging machine. And then some of the products do contain a UV additive, which actually changes the color of the grass for the geese, but not humans. And this can actually be seen in the lower right picture. With this additive, geese would see the grass as a purplish tinge, so it would look unnatural to them, whereas humans are still seeing the treated grass as green. Both of these products are rain fast, but one of the disadvantages is that when the grass is mowed, it does have to be reapplied because you just cut away the grass that contained the product. So it is typically recommended for smaller areas, not large acreages, just because of the cost involved. So the MA repellents actually contains a grape flavor additive that's approved by the FDA. It's used in beverages, ice cream, chewing gum, and it also naturally occurs in products such as Concord grapes, blossoms of gardenias, and much more. How this works is it causes minor irritation to the bird's eyes, nose, or mouth, and then they associate that with the area, and they prefer not to be there. The AQ is an organic chemical that occurs naturally in 94 known plant species. This one, the geese must actually ingest the grass because it affects the bird's stomach, basically gives them an upset stomach. So for the harassment, one options are pyrotechnics, and those are specialized explosive devices, kind of like a firecracker, used to disperse nuisance animals without injuring them. And you can see from the pictures, it's pretty much like a 2-inch cartridge that gets launched out of a special pistol. There's no permit required for most of the brands and most of the type of pyrotechnics. And the companies that do sell these, they have their website clearly labeled which ones need permits and which ones don't. One type are called bangers, and they give off a noise that's actually similar to a shotgun. But the noise travels for about 50 to 125 feet in the air, while the ones that are called screamers or whistlers they have more of a screeching sound, and they have a longer range of about 250 feet. Both the bangers or the screamers produce the same noise level with 100 decibels. Some things just to keep in mind with pyrotechnics, you would want to check with your local government to make sure there's no ordinances that would not allow their use. You would want to use eye and ear protection. You would want to store them properly in a magazine because they can be a fire hazard. And since given that, you also want to use caution if the weather is dry or windy. So some other auditory devices that can be used for noise harassment are an air horn, which is available, to most people by just going to any store that sells boating supplies. It's a can of compressed air. There are propane cannons that are typically used in an agricultural setting. And then there are sound systems that have speakers and pre-recordings of the bird's distress call, as well as predator calls, such as a bald eagle. One thing to note here is that birds do hear at the same level as humans, so an ultrasonic device will not be effective for geese. Harassment, it's defined as to annoy or disturb persistently. This can be in the form of dog harassment, where the handler does have to be in control of the dog. So they have to prevent the dog from making contact with the geese and causing potential injury. It could be through a vehicle, a golf cart, kayak, or even somebody on foot. Once again, no contact with the geese, so that no injury is occurring. The use of remote control cars or boat for harassment. Falconers have used falcons to harass geese. And then there are kites, especially ones that look like an eagle, that have been used to harass geese from areas such as swimming beaches. And one thing to note are that drones are currently not allowed for harassment of wildlife or birds in New Jersey. So you might have already been picking up on this, but there is no single solution for goose control. It is truly a mix of using different techniques, mixing them up, using them consistently when the geese are present, different times of the day. So the last part I'll talk about population management and egg addling. And population management can include the depredation permits, regulated sport hunting, and the nest and egg management. Depredation permits are issued by another federal agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. These permits allow for limited lethal control of geese year-round, so outside of the hunting season. And they might be appropriate for places such as farms that are experiencing damage, and crop loss, as well as golf courses. The application is 12 questions and topics that have to be answered for the permit application are the damage that's occurring, the monetary loss that has occurred, and the non-lethal techniques that have been used. And once the permit is issued, the non-lethal techniques are required to continue as well. So regulated sport hunting in New Jersey, there are 3 seasons that are open to hunters. One being the September season, which covers the whole month and the whole state. This one has a bag limit of 15 geese per day. And this is the most liberal season with the highest number of birds that can be taken. And that's because in September, only our resident goose population is present. The migratory geese have are not present. What's known as the regular season kind of coincides with the duck hunting season. And there are certain days in the months of November, December, and January. The state's broken down into 3 zones, and only 1 to 2 geese can be removed a day. And the way the 3 different zones are determined is by the migratory bird usage, typically within New Jersey. And they determine that by, if you're familiar with the metal leg bands that are put on various birds, they each have a unique number. And then when that band is reported by a birder or maybe even a hunter that harvested it, it gives the agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the USGS, Geological Service, information on the bird's movements, how long the bird lived, as well as its migration. And then lastly, there's a special winter season, which is just mid-January through mid-February. And it's only in these black, the zones shaded in black on the map. And the bag limit is slightly higher at 5 birds a day. And once again, these zones were determined by the migratory bird usage and the leg bands. So the areas in black have lower migratory birds during this special winter hunting season. And the remainder of the state that's in yellow is closed to hunting. So what is nest and egg management? It's the reproductive control through the treatment, otherwise known as addling, of Canada goose eggs so that they do not hatch. In the next slide, I'll discuss the why, the who, when, where, what, and how. So why conduct nest and egg management? This help maintains the resident Canada goose problem on a local level. It also helps alleviate droppings associated with family groups. So if the eggs hatched and the pair had the young with them, those young are not able to fly for about 2 to 3 months. So they would be in the general area for that amount of time, and the amount of droppings from that family group would be accumulating. It also allows for the harassment to be more effective if you only had adult presence. If the eggs were treated, you would only have the pair present, and when you harassed, they'd be able to fly away. If they had young with them, they wouldn't be able to leave the general area. They would just really be able to walk from one property to another, go in and out of the water until those young are able to fly. So who can carry out the egg addling? There are 3 options. Landowners can do the work on their own land after they obtain a free online registration. And that's what the background of this slide is showing. It's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service website. It is a simple process to register. And as I said, there's no cost involved. It's about a 5 to 10 minute process. And after that, it does allow you to immediately go out and treat any eggs that are on your property. It doesn't allow you to go to a town park and treat any eggs or treat eggs that are like on your neighbor's property. The other options are private companies, as well as my agency, the USDA Wildlife Services. So some tips for searching for nests. Properties should be searched between late March and late May. And this is the goose nesting season and breeding season within New Jersey. The properties should be searched about every 2 weeks. And you should concentrate the search around bodies of water, ponds, creeks, and even marshes. There's going to be some variance. Some geese nest in plain sight, while others are more secretive and hide their nests. They're also going to act differently when a person approaches the nest. Some geese may be aggressive. Others might leave the nest as soon as you start walking or kayaking towards it. And then others try to blend in and camouflage. But the nest searching and egg addling should be done annually. Because even if their eggs are addled the previous year, their instinct is to still return to that area to nest in future years. So this is the $1,000,000 question. Where do geese nest? And my answer is anywhere and everywhere. So there are some typical spots that geese like to nest, and this is going to be along the shorelines. If there are any islands, they do like islands because they feel more protected from predators. And for this reason, they also kind of like peninsulas. It offers them a little more protection and it gives them a little bit more of a 360 view. Such as in the top right picture, they also do like muskrat houses and beaver lodges, kind of gives them a little bit of elevation. And then sometimes they simply like just being out in the open, by a tree on a lawn, against a building. So once again, they can have a good view.
Nicole is 6:40, just to let you know.
Okay, thank you. So some unusual nesting spots that geese have chosen. They do like those parking lot islands. In the top left picture, she's actually nesting in the shrubbery of one. Outlined in red, you'll just see her head sticking up. They do like planter beds or those urn-like vases to nest in those. They have found a use for abandoned tires. On the top right, she's nesting on top of one. And then we have even found inside hollow out trees, on top of stumps. We have found them on roof awnings, as well as like on, I want to say it was like a 25-foot statue that I think a Catholic school had on their property. There was a goose nesting on. So what to look for if you're searching for a nest? There's two categories here. One is if the goose is physically on the nest, and then if the goose isn't. So when the goose is in the nest and she's out in an open area, you're gonna see that goose sitting in the same spot for a few days all day. Or you might see sticking out from underneath her some of her nesting material or the down feathers. But if she's in denser vegetation, you're going to be looking for her white cheek patch is going to stand out, as well as like her buff colored chest. The rest of her brown body is going to blend in pretty good with the environment. Sometimes there's a lone goose that's the male lookout in the area in the water, and this could mean that its mate is sitting on a nest. Also, if you're looking out at open water and then a goose suddenly appears off the shoreline, that could be a female that got scared off of a nest. And then also a goose that is honking and kind of just not happy you're in the general area. So sometimes these geese that are honking or the lone male goose, they might actually try to lead you away from the nest. So what if the female is not present? You might be able to see the eggs or the down feathers in the nest, but there is a chance that the female might have kicked some material over this to hide it. And in that case, you're looking for unusual piles of vegetation that kind of form a 12 to 24 inch diameter circle. The materials kind of go in a clockwise or a counterclockwise direction. It's a few inches high off the ground, and it's made by material that's nearby. The goose is going to stand at her nest area and pull the material in from her surroundings. So if there's pine needles on the ground, that's where her nest is going to be. Could be Phragmites, it could be leaves. So if you found a nest that you didn't see the goose sitting on, to confirm that it's a goose nest is by the size of the egg. So a mallard or duck egg is the size of the eggs you buy at the store, and a goose egg is about 3 times the size of that. A swan egg is going to be different in color. It's more olive and about twice the size of a goose egg. As far as the incubation, it's going to be the female solely. She's going to lay 1 egg per day, average about 5 eggs in her nest, but it can range from 3 to 10. She's not going to start incubating those eggs until after the last one is laid. So if she is laying 5 eggs, it's going to take her about 5 days before she starts incubating. She's going to incubate those eggs for 28 days, sitting on the nest what seems like 24/7. She does occasionally leave for food and water, but for the most part, you're going to see her sitting on the nest. And then lastly, she lines her nest with down feathers that she plucked from her belly. Interestingly, in the photo here, you can see there's an outrageous number of down feathers. It's normally maybe 1/10 of this amount. But she had no nesting material nearby to make a nest out of. So without all these down feathers, her eggs would have been directly on the ground. So as far as addling, there's 3 approved methods: oiling, puncturing, and shaking. Oiling is the most popular, so I'll describe that. You have to use 100% food grade corn oil. It's advised to mark each egg with a Sharpie marker so that when you go back to that nest in another 2 weeks or so to see if there's more eggs, you'll know which ones have been treated already. And what you're going to do is you got to pick up each egg and using a spray bottle, you're going to spray at least 2/3 the egg, and the oil will run and cover the remaining part of the egg. So the Humane Society does state that in Canada geese, eggs can be humanely addled that are less than 14 days old. So that is one reason to go out every 2 weeks. But if you don't know how long the goose has been sitting there, you can also float the eggs in a bucket of water, and that will tell you the age. If in the diagram here, eggs 1, 2, and 3 don't float. They're under 14 days. And then 4, 5, and 6 are between 14 days and 28 days. And they'll float in the bucket of water. So we do recommend that the eggs, after they are addled, be returned to the nest. The reason for this is that it prevents the pair from re-nesting in that same season, mating again and having another nest, because that nest might be on a property that can't be accessed, or the nest might be hidden and not found. The female will likely still incubate and sit on those addled eggs anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. Eggs can be removed if it's a threat to human safety, such as an aggressive pair nesting at the entrance to a building. And then some of the geese might be aggressive, so how to approach the nest. It is best if 2 people approach the nest, one to do the actual egg addling and one to keep the geese away from the nest. When you approach the nest, it's best not to hesitate to go directly to the nest. You want to watch out for their wings and their bills, and also any birds that might fly at you. And this last bullet is true whether you're addling eggs or if you're just walking by a nest. You never want to turn your back on either of the nesting geese. They know you're not paying attention, and they find this as a time to fly at you. So USDA's nest and egg work, we conduct our work from late March to late May, which is the breeding season. We visit each site about 5 times, which is every 2 weeks. Each visit, we're looking for new nests and checking existing. Our method of addling the eggs is puncturing them and returning them to the nest. And then we do need written permission from a landowner before addling the eggs if it's on a private shoreline and private property. So in summary, there is no single solution. Also that any intentional feeding should be eliminated because that strong food source is gonna not make harassment and your other techniques as effective as they would be if there was no food present. Third, you want to use multiple techniques and be persistent. And then fourth, you do want to conduct annual nest and egg treatment if you have a nesting population. So I do believe we have a few minutes for questions.
Yes, we do, Nicole.
Okay.
We have about 8 minutes.
Okay.
So if anybody would like to at this time, Ken, if you would open it up, and anyone who would like to ask questions, state your name, where you live, and then go ahead with your question.
I'll start off with a question. It's a simple question. Don Brock with the Lake Commission. What's the best time to do the grass treatment?
Really, anytime that you're having, the problem with the geese. The geese are going to be more than likely to eat the grass. During the seasons, you normally have to mow the grass, and that is, greener. So the springtime, they might be more concentrating on the nesting. So definitely during the summer, but it can be a possibility in the spring and the fall as well.
Okay. Because I was thinking of the late winter, early spring for the to avoid the nesting. If they don't like the grass, maybe they'll fly somewhere else. That was a thought that we had. Is that incorrect or correct?
They're going to have that strong instinct to stay in the general area. So if they're nesting in a spot that is lawn-like, that might deter them. But if they're nesting more on like a boat dock or in a flower urn, they're still going to feel comfortable even though the nearby lawn is treated.
Okay. And the nesting, the ones you're treating, you see them coming back year in and year out, correct?
Yes, and the geese aren't marked with any unique markings, so I can't tell you 100% it's the same individual. Yeah. But I do find nests sometimes in the same exact location or, between the same 3 properties type of thing. And there are others that fluctuate a little bit more.
Thanks. Very impressive briefing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. Yes, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that you could hear me.
Yes, we hear you, Barbara.
Yes, I'm Barbara Maggs. I live in Lake Como, which is in Belmar.
Okay.
And I actually had 2 questions because I go for walks around the lake and the geese are there all the time. And I have no problem watching them. But depending on the time of year and when I go, one of my questions is I noticed in one of the pictures you had the orange numbered, I guess the paper band around their neck.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know what that was for. And my other question was, why would it be around their neck versus their foot? But then later I heard you explain about the little metal tag on their foot. So I'm assuming that's probably why, but I wasn't sure what the orange number meant or what it stood for.
Right. Yep. No problem. So there are specific studies. It might be run by a state fish and wildlife agency or maybe a university that they're looking at something specifically about, certain movements about a certain population of geese.
Okay.
So they want that bird to be a little bit more visible and people to report more data and locations on it. So those metal leg bands, you really can't read the number unless you have a good spotting scope or, you have the bird actually in hand. So those colored bands, collars that are put around their neck, that's something that, if you are walking around your lake and you spot one of those, it is something you can go to a website and report it. And that will help know the migratory patterns of that bird or how long the bird stays in New Jersey or how long the bird had stayed in Delaware. And sometimes it gives, the bird has survived another year, so it does give survival information as well.
Okay.
But basically those collars are just easier for people to report the information, and then the researcher is actually getting more data.
Okay. And just as a protective, And I would assume the answer is no, but I just always ask because I had noticed it a while ago. And so they never, how do I want to say this? There's never any damage or where they're too tight, or, I mean, I know that's probably a stupid question, but I always think like if they put their neck wrong, can they get caught on something? They've never found any issues having them in that position? Okay.
Yeah. They've used them for several years, and the people that put those on the birds, they have to have a special permit.
Okay.
So they know how to properly put them on the bird.
Okay.
So it's not going to be too tight, or, cause any problems for the bird.
Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question?
Yes.
Go ahead, Melanie. You're muted.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Nicole. Thank you for the presentation.
Yes.
Very informative. I wanted to just ask you two questions. You said something about puncturing eggs, and then you said something about after you puncture the eggs.
Yeah. So the popular method for treating the eggs is coating them in the corn oil. But another option is to just create a small hole in the egg. And that's what I mean by puncturing. And for us, we use that method so that it's less equipment that we have to carry, when we're searching a large area or when we're treating a high number of nests. So it's just a different method of addling, an approved method.
And so they would get punctured regardless of how many days old they were.
Well, and it would be the same thing with the corn oil. Your U.S. Fish and Wildlife registration or permit does allow you to addle eggs at any stage. But we go out every 2 weeks to try to hit that under the 14-day mark.
But my question, I guess, was, and I had spoken to you about this before because I had been confused when we first talked about addling, because I thought that they were being tested for the viability, dropping them in the water, to see how old they were and if they had been fertilized. But it appears that doesn't get done anymore.
At our agency, no, we don't use that method. We go, we've searched the area 2 weeks ago. She has 6 eggs, so she didn't start incubating until 6 days later. And then we found the nest.
When you say your agency doesn't use that, who does use that?
It can be used by anybody else. I'm not sure if private companies use it. Homeowners, it's optional if they want to use it when they find and treat a nest on their own on their property.
Okay, well, I guess that's what it was before when we were doing volunteer work to do it. Okay, thank you so much once again.
No problem.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yeah, this is Ness Cohen from Deal. I have a question.
Yeah.
As far as coming around Deal Lake, do you need, is it something that we can provide if we have a home that's on the lake, authorization in advance to come on and take a look and see if there are nests, or is it something that we have to actually see and then call you about? Because to be honest, in the pictures that you showed, I didn't see any nests, but apparently there were many. So I don't think we'd even spot them realistically.
Yeah. And how it works when I kayak around Deal Lake during the breeding season, I only have agreements with certain towns. So if I do find a nest, since the geese are typically near the shoreline, I can, see a certain portion into a property and, have seen so many nests that I can, even if the goose is not in it, I can see if I'm suspicious of an area. And at that time, myself or I've asked the Deal Lake commissioners to reach out to that homeowner to give me that permission to walk on the property or treat that nest. So to answer your question, it's one or two things. It would be if a homeowner finds a nest on their own, they can reach out to me or reach out to the commission. Or if I see a nest from the kayak on somebody's property, I write down the address and I try to make contact with that person to get permission.
I guess, would it be possible to give you that permission in advance? And I suspect myself and many of my neighbors would be more than happy to give you permission. And, this way you then have the ability to do that on the spot as opposed to going away and then coming back.
Yes and no. Yes, it would be good, so that I don't have that extra time of getting the slip. But it's not something that I'm going to be able to walk around everybody's backyard just due to the number of houses that are potentially on the lake.
Yeah, no, I understood. But if we can provide, I don't know if there's a form or a letter, and myself, my neighbors, and maybe others on the Deal Lake Commission, if they feel this is a good idea, so that you can then check off you've got all this access, do with it what you can. But at least you don't need to do that.
That could be something that I do look into for next year, and try to get some prior to the season starting.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We definitely can look into that.
Yeah,
okay, Don, I'll work with you and your staff on that.
And
as
sir,
well as the town.
where you live, sir? What town?
we live in Deal.
Deal. I think Deal's covered. Is that correct?
I actually can't say who I have agreements with.
Okay, I got you.
Sorry.
But most of Deal Lake is covered, as my understanding. So,
Yes, most of the shoreline is.
Yeah. Thanks. New Jersey LCV, please.
Hi, my name is Molly. Sorry, I'm on my work Zoom account. I'm in the Lake Apacon area. And I was just curious I've heard that riparian buffers can help deter geese nesting or just from them hanging out in general. Is that accurate?
I would say hanging out, the buffers might have a little bit. But as far as nesting, I have found them in, a variety of areas, whether it's a marsh covered in frag or, a marsh that has native vegetation. So, and if the geese are already nesting there, their instinct is going to be to find a spot, in that general area to nest that they find suitable.
Thanks, Nicole. Any more questions? Well, any more questions out there? Okay, I got one last question. I hope you can answer.
Yeah.
The number of two questions actually. Number of nests found on Deal Lake and number of eggs treated in 2021.
Okay. Yep. So 2021, I had 48 eggs, and that was in 11 nests, and that was pretty average as compared to other years. It fluctuates, I would say, between 10 and 12 nests on an average year.
Okay, thanks. That's quite a bit. So thank you for your work.
Yeah.
And thanks for the briefing. And we'll get this up online. I guess the raw briefing itself we can put up also. Is that possible, Nicole? Put it on our website under our Goose management area.
I'm sorry. Put the actual
briefing on.
You mean the PowerPoint, Don?
Yes, the PowerPoint. Yep.
You want to put that up as a separate to the video, right?
Sure.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So I do have permission for you guys to do that.
Awesome. Thank you again, and we'll be seeing you in the late winter again, I guess, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you everyone for attending. Have a good evening.
Thanks for everyone coming.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nicole.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you.
We're going to